Hello everyone, Derived Energy, and this will be my final video I think in the UK debate series. I was in the middle of talking about death of all things. Right, somebody says most old people do not fear death, for the rationality is as they age they become immobile, more dependent on others, suffer the pain of failing joints and limbs, failing eyes and hearing, loss of teeth and shrinking gums, with the embarrassment of incontinence, perhaps the pain and breathlessness of heart diseases and cancers. That death is to be welcomed. For all the wonders of medical science and our faith in the NHS, that's the British National Health Service, the process of deterioration is inevitable, so a week or a month or a year's extra is of little consequence in the scheme of things. Dying is such an easy thing to do. Is this person making my arguments for me here? I mean, if that is a list of things that precedes death, then I'd argue that dying is not such an easy thing to do at all. This kind of setting, it's kind of this strategy, it's like minimizing the pain and suffering that there is in life, in order to try to justify bringing new life into it, but it's not cutting the mustard with me at all. Somebody says, excuse me, I would agree that our population is totally out of control on this planet, but I wouldn't stop people having children at all. There is a place for us, but it is a case of finding the right balance, and currently we are more of a pest than anything else. And I reply, forgive me, but this isn't an argument. It's just an assertion based on your subjective feelings. I've built up a wall of logic here, and as far as I'm concerned, it's up to you guys to knock it down or admit defeat. Please can somebody deconstruct the thought experiment in my video in order to demonstrate why it is not relevant or appropriate to the subject in hand, that is, the ethics of procreation. If your argument is merely that people are irrational animals and they therefore have a right to procreate and are not acting immorally when they do so, then I see your point entirely. If, however, your argument is based on logic and reason, then I would really like to hear it. They reply, well, for a start, human beings are insensitivized to procreate by way of an orgasm. This system ensures that humans will carry on producing. But it doesn't, does it? I mean, there are such things as the pill and condoms. As for death, it is inevitable. Animals, plants, flowers, trees all come to an end, and there is nothing in the manuals to stop it, and never will be. For if there were, then there must come a time when we can no longer afford to reproduce, and that would counter my first sentence. There is only so much space on this planet. Some must die to give way for the newborn, and of course there is only so much grub to go round. The more living space that is built means less arable farming land for staple foodstuffs. Really, life is a self-fulfilling cycle that works well if the system is not abused. Life is a self-fulfilling cycle that works well if the system is not abused. How can this whole concept of life work well when it's just resulting in pointless suffering? It's not a better state of affairs than non-existence. It's a distinctly inferior state to non-existence. These are not a lot. I say to the person who talked about the process of slowly dying. Those are not a list of symptoms that I would ever wish to experience. What if I wish to avoid them by not allowing myself to get to the age where they start to become a problem for me by committing suicide? I would then have to face the fear of death because I would be facing it earlier in life than the person you just described in your post, who lets their body willingly fall to pieces on them and lets Mother Nature run its full course. And then I address the person who said dying is such an easy thing to do. Please can you provide evidence that dying is an easy thing to do, and demonstrate how this adjective applies to everyone who has been and who will ever be born in the future. After all, if one does not come into existence, then one never experiences dying. That is one good reason why, personally speaking, I would have preferred it if I had never come into existence. I hold my parents morally accountable for putting me into this disturbing and frightening situation. I know my parents did not set out to entrap me in such a way, but I can see that they were misguided, perhaps because they hadn't been exposed to anti-natalist arguments because nobody was perceptive enough to value them or courageous enough to express them in public. What carrots can you entice a non-existent person into existence with that could possibly make their life anything other than a combination of pointless suffering and insanity? And I use the word insanity because it is literally insane to think that anything that happens in your life was a reason for you to come into existence in the first place. Just loading up the last page here. Internet speed is horrific. Okay. Someone says, better to have been than not, for without having life one cannot have thoughts and feelings about it. It's just a bold assertion. We are all different and most live their lives with periods of happiness and enjoyment. I would suggest that the more we are threatened with death at an early age, the more we wish to live. Another bold assertion. Those with depression should look to the future with hope, in the expectation that things will improve for them and they will overcome what ails them and will get better. Time is a great healer of body and mind. Not giving in to black thoughts is a kindness to those around us who would be left behind. 500,000 people a year, every year in Britain, die from numerous causes, some prolonged and some so sudden they know nothing about it. I have sat with many a person as they pass away, and not one thought or resisted the passing. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is today's gifts, that's why we call it the present. I answer, the billions of ecstatically happy people in my video won't be able to have any thoughts and feelings about anything either, but I certainly wouldn't bring them into the universe if that little boy had to be thrown to Freddy Krueger in order to appease Sargrog. See my video at the start of this thread. We are all different, and I say I've never disputed this nor needed to for the purpose of this debate. About the idea that the more we're threatened with death at an early age, the more we wish to live. I say, is that view based on empirical knowledge or by any logical reasoning? In any case, what has that really got to do with any of my arguments? People may, in my view, will suffer if you bring them into existence. If you don't bring them into existence, then there's no one who is being deprived of any pleasant mental states. Ergo, we have a moral obligation not to bring people into existence, and no moral obligation working in the other direction. Referring to the point about looking to the future with hope, if you're depressed, I said they can only do their best in a losing situation. Any meaning or joy they may find in their lives was never a reason to bring them into existence, because they wouldn't have missed out on those things if they hadn't been born. All that's left after that is the battle they have within themselves to find some kind of peace of mind that will end in death anyway. Time is a great healer of body and mind, I reply. It's also a window of opportunity in which more suffering can and does happen. Don't you see how ridiculous your justifications for bringing new life into the world are? We can help ourselves and others to reduce their suffering, so we're going to bring children into the world to help do that. It's either using babies as instrumental tools in order to alleviate suffering that already exists in the world, or it's setting up challenges for people to face purely for the sake of it. Giving into black thoughts, I said, I can see your reasoning here, and it's not without merit. However, not giving in to irrational beliefs is also important if you are considering whether to create a new human being who has absolutely no need to come into existence, and who, at the very least, will die as a result of the impositions the parents placed upon their offspring. When they said, I have sat with many a person as they pass away, not one thought or resisted the passing, I answer, why would they? Even if they did fight or resist it, what purpose would that achieve other than prolonging their discomfort and suffering? And about the quaint little poetic sentence the author of this post made, yesterday is history, today is a mystery, today is God's gift, that's why we call it the present. I said, that's a poetic sentiment that does not constitute argumentation. The Benatarian asymmetry eliminates the possibility of a benevolent God automatically. though it does not do away with the possibility of a malevolent God. I personally reject both hypotheses, but I cannot discount the latter possibility on logic alone. It requires a leap of faith, as it were. Why would a benevolent God wish to bring us into existence so that he can test us and then send some or even all of us to heaven? As my arguments have shown, there is never any reason to regret that somebody didn't come into existence. So why should we regret that somebody didn't come into existence, even if we knew that if they did, they would spend an eternity in paradise? Someone says, it seems that I see my glass as being half full and you see yours as half empty. Of course, if you hadn't been born, then we would not be discussing this. I'm all for reducing the world's population by means that does not cause suffering, but I'm not sure that I would want those means for myself or my family to follow. There will come a time when all the world's politicians will have to face that very problem, for we cannot continue to expand in numbers at the current rate. When they say about the glass half full, half empty thing, I just said, I'm afraid it's not that simple. The Benatarian asymmetry is so far proven to be unimpeachable. I've yet to hear even a plausible argument against it, despite immersing myself in the study of this philosophy for several years. I would argue that although the rejection or acceptance of the asymmetry is reliant on the subjectivity of the people who are exposed to it, the actual asymmetry itself captures a deep ontological truth about the human condition that cannot be denied if one is being intellectually honest with oneself. If you still fail to see the unerring logic in the asymmetry, I invite you to deconstruct my premises or conclusions that flow from them, or deconstruct the video I left a link to in order to spark off this debate. The philosophy forum I got banned from didn't want to address my video with a barge pole, and I think they were wise to refuse to do so, considering their modus operandi. The video distills the core essence of Benatar's theory into a bite-sized meme and leads one to the inescapable conclusion regarding the human condition, unless one employs a psychological defense mechanism such as avoidance, projection, etc. Of course, if you hadn't been born, then we would not be discussing this. Whilst this is obviously a truism, I still fail to see how it makes any dent in my argument whatsoever. When they say they're all for reducing the world population, I say, but they don't want themselves or their family to follow that route. I say, I understand this and I am sympathetic. However, we have to be honest with ourselves and recognise that procreation is misguided, and if one takes on board this asymmetry, unambiguously immoral from a deontological moral perspective, and immoral from a negative utilitarian perspective as well. If you have children or grandchildren or whatever, and they help to make the world a better place, then from a negative utilitarian perspective, their existence has conferred a benefit to other suffering creatures. However, they themselves would not have been benefited by coming into existence, so I think it's misguided / immoral to bring them into the world. When they say there will come a time when all the world's politicians will have to face the problem of overpopulation, I'd say this is true, but I would argue further that any human population more than zero is less than ideal, as then there would be the prospect of suffering and the inevitability of death, when, as I have been at great pains to show, existence does not confer any advantage over non-existence. The answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is, roll the drums please, everything is pointless. If you're still in doubt, watch my video again. Douglas Adams would be proud. 42 was a stupid answer anyway. C2, emerging yet again, says, the Benatarian asymmetry may be unimpeachable. The conclusion drawn from it most certainly is not. So you just let your intuitive, subjective feelings, uninformed by logic, dictate to you what the conclusion should be, and you just ignore a logical argument. And so I reply, so where has there been foul play on my part in extrapolating conclusions about the human condition based on the asymmetry? And she says, I think it's a she, the asymmetry does not have to rule. It might appear logical to those who think life should either be without pain or death, or we should not exist at all, but in my opinion that is an illogical position to be in. I see Benatar's asymmetry as the culmination of the reasoning made by someone with an extremely serious emotional, psychological problem, and Benatar, in my opinion, fits that mould. And I reply, But the asymmetry is fully grounded in logic, as I have unfailingly demonstrated throughout this thread. All you are arguing here is that your intuition rejects the asymmetry, and then you fire an ad hominem attack at the philosopher who constructed the theory. This might seem a satisfactory rebuttal to you, but I find it distinctly wanting. First of all, you thought you could dismantle his theory using reasoned arguments. I mean, I had an extremely long debate with C2 prior to this post that I've been narrating on YouTube. It went on for like weeks and weeks and weeks. Where am I? But obviously she didn't make any kind of half decent arguments against the asymmetry. I continue anyway. A casual observer might comment here that you have a great deal of emotional investment in the ethical questions the theory raises, and that your otherwise sound judgment has been severely impaired on this issue. Why is it illogical that we should not exist at all, given that if this were the case, then there would be no pain or suffering experienced by anybody whatsoever, and no deprivation of pleasant or meaningful conscious experiences by anybody whatsoever? Please explain this to me. I'm anxious to know. And she says, I don't see it as an ad hominem attack. I see it as a light shone upon a dark philosophy. Right. When I said I find their rebuttal, distinctly wanting, she just says, I find it distinctly obvious. Just bold assertion. I said, first of all, you thought you could dismantle this theory using reasoned arguments, and she said, it is self-evident to me that there is nothing logical in arriving at the conclusion that human life should cease to exist. So self-evident, you have to examine things when you say they are self-evident. You have to examine everything. Weak. Where is the reasoning behind that? There's no reasoning. It's just a bold assertion based on her subjective desire and belief, dogmatic, irrational belief that human life should continue to exist and we should keep on reproducing. She says there is nothing illogical about survival. There is everything illogical about elimination. It's just another bold assertion. And then she says because life is about making the best of the situation. It's not about perfection or nothing. Just another bold assertion. There's no logic here. There's no rationale. There's no reasoning. It's just they're just bold assertions based on her subjective feelings. And I reply, these again are just bold assertions without any argumentation. I'd be wasting my time and yours debating this with you any further if this is where you just dogmatically decide to hold firm. So I think we should end it here. Thank you for spending so much time debating this issue with you, C2. I've learnt a lot. I want to end on a positive note, so take care, and I hope everything goes as well as it can for you. And that's the end of the video, and that's the end of my UK debate forum videos. Hurrah!